My name is Harrison, but most people just call me Grandpa Harry. I'm 68 years old, and on what should have been a simple, quiet birthday morning, a day I hoped to spend sipping tea and watching the sunrise, everything shifted. Instead of a happy birthday, I opened my front door to see my mother-in-law standing there, dressed like she was attending a victory parade, waving a stack of papers with a smile that told me she had been waiting for this moment. She didn't even let me speak. She just pushed the divorce papers into my hands, as if she was delivering a package nobody wanted to sign for. My wife didn't come herself. Cowardice runs deep in people who think they've already won. They believed they were casting out an old, worn-out man, a man with no savings, no strength, and no future. But the truth is, I had seen their betrayal long before they even put it in motion, and while they were busy underestimating me, I was quietly building something they never imagined I could create. A life, a plan, an empire. And that birthday morning, I didn't lose a marriage. I gained the perfect moment to reveal the secret I had been protecting for years. Before I begin the full story, let me know in the comments, where are you watching this from? To everyone who stands with me, listens to these stories, and keeps this community alive. Thank you. Your support reminds me that even when family betrays you, we can still build our own. And if you're new here, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and hit that bell. You're not just joining a channel, you're joining a family that refuses to stay silent. Now, let me tell you what really happened on the day they tried to throw me away. The sunrise that morning was beautiful. I remember thinking that as I sat in my worn leather chair by the window, holding my first cup of tea. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the kind of dawn that makes you grateful to be alive. 68 years on this earth, and I still found wonder in simple things. I wasn't expecting visitors. Grace, my wife, had left early. She said something about meeting her mother, Jade, for breakfast. Birthday shopping, she called it, though her voice had that hollow ring it always carried when she lied. I'd learned to recognize that sound years ago. It's funny how betrayal has a pitch, a frequency you start to hear even in silence. I didn't argue. I just nodded, kissed her cheek like a dutiful husband, and watched her walk out the door. Our daughter, Savannah, hadn't called yet. Not unusual. She was busy with her own life, her own friends, her own world that seemed to have less and less room for Grandpa Harry as the years went on. I told myself it was natural. Kids grow up, they move on. But the truth was darker than that, and I knew it. I was halfway through my tea when the doorbell rang. For a moment, I considered not answering. It was my birthday, after all. I deserved peace. But old habits die hard, and I'm still a man who answers his door when someone knocks. I should have stayed in my chair. When I opened the door, there she was, Jade. My mother-in-law stood on my porch in a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, her silver hair styled like she'd just stepped out of a salon. She wasn't alone. Grace and Savannah stood behind her, both avoiding my eyes like children caught sneaking cookies before dinner. But it was Jade's smile that hit me first. Triumphant. Gleeful. The smile of someone who'd been holding a secret for so long that the release of it felt like victory. "Harrison," she said, and her voice was syrup, fake sweetness masking something venomous underneath. "Happy birthday." She didn't wait for me to respond. She lifted her hand, and that's when I saw it. A thick manila envelope. She pushed it into my chest, not gently, forcing me to take it or let it fall. "This is long overdue," she said. I looked down at the envelope. My name was printed on the front in clean corporate letters. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. Divorce papers. I looked up at Grace, my wife of 42 years, the woman I'd built a life with, raised a daughter with, buried my parents beside. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. "Grace," I said quietly. She flinched, actually flinched like my voice had physically struck her. Jade answered for her. Grace has made a decision, Harrison. It's time for both of you to move forward. You've been, well, let's just say you've been a weight she's been carrying far too long. A weight. The word landed like a stone in my chest. I looked at Savannah, my daughter, 36 years old, with my eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She was staring at the porch, her arms crossed, her jaw tight. Savannah? I tried. She finally looked at me. Her expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was indifferent. Dad, she said, and even that word sounded wrong in her mouth. This is what's best, for everyone. I felt something crack inside me. Not break, not yet, but crack, like ice on a frozen lake when the temperature shifts just enough. I looked back down at the envelope in my hands. They expected me to fight. I could see it in the way Jade stood, her shoulders squared, ready for battle. Grace had probably rehearsed her lines. Savannah had probably been coached on what to say if I got emotional. But I didn't fight. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just nodded slowly and said, "Okay." Jade blinked. "Okay? Okay," I repeated. "If this is what you want, Grace, then okay." The confusion on their faces was almost worth the pain. Grace finally looked at me, and for just a second I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt? Doubt? It didn't matter. It was gone as quickly as it came. "I'll have my things out by the end of the week," I said calmly. Jade recovered first, her smile returning. "That's very mature of you, Harrison. Very practical." I didn't respond. I just stood there, holding the envelope, watching the 3 women I loved most in the world look at me like I was a problem they'd finally solved. They turned to leave. Jade called over her shoulder. "Oh, and Harrison, don't make this difficult. You don't have the resources for a legal fight. Trust me." I watched them walk down my driveway, get into Jade's luxury sedan, and drive away. I stood on that porch for a long time after they were gone, the envelope still in my hands, the morning sun now fully risen. They thought they knew me. They thought they knew what I had. They were wrong. And as I finally closed the door and walked back into the house that was more mine than they could ever imagine, I allowed myself one thing I hadn't permitted in 7 long years. I smiled. If you're feeling this story so far, drop a like and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you next, they never saw it coming. And neither will you. Let me take you back. 7 years before that birthday morning, I was 61 years old, still working as a structural engineer consultant, still useful in the eyes of my family, still visible. It was a Thursday evening. I remember because I'd come home early from a site inspection, my back aching from climbing scaffolding that men half my age complained about. Grace's car was in the driveway, which was unusual for that time of day. She normally went to her book club on Thursdays, or so she said. I walked into our house quietly, not sneaking, just tired, and heard voices upstairs. Grace was on the phone in our bedroom. The door was cracked open just enough that her voice carried down the hallway. I started toward the stairs to let her know I was home, but then I heard my name. "Harrison has no idea," Grace said, and she was laughing. I froze at the bottom of the stairs. The rational part of my brain told me to announce myself, to cough, to call out, to give her the courtesy of privacy. But something deeper, some instinct I'd learned to ignore in 42 years of marriage, told me to stay quiet. So I did. "Mom, I know," Grace continued, her voice bright with an energy I hadn't heard in years. "But we have to be patient. Just a few more years until his pension fully vests, until the house is completely paid off." My chest tightened. A woman's voice came through the phone speaker, tinny but clear. "Jade, you've waited this long, darling. What's a few more years? Once he's got nothing left to offer, once everything's secure, you can finally live the life you deserve. You and Savannah." Grace sighed. "I just hate pretending. He's so... God, Mom, he's so boring. All he talks about is work and his stupid projects in the garage. Levi makes me feel alive again. Levi. The name hit me like a fist. Is he still pressuring you to leave Harrison? Jade asked. Every day, Grace admitted. But I told him we have to be smart about this. If I file now, Harrison will fight. He'll drag it out, and we'll lose half of everything. But if we wait until he retires, until he's older and, less capable, it'll be easier. He won't have the energy to fight back. Jade laughed. It was a cold sound, sharp and cruel. That's my smart girl. You've put up with that man long enough. He's been dead weight for years. Once this is over, you can finally be happy. Dead weight. I stood in that hallway, my hand gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't a bad day. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. They were counting down the days until I was no longer useful, until I was too old, too tired, too broken to defend myself. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't confront her. I quietly walked back out the front door, got in my truck, and drove to a coffee shop 3 miles away. I sat there for 2 hours, staring at nothing, my mind racing. Some men would have exploded, would have stormed back home, demanded answers, filed for divorce that very night. But I've always been a builder, an engineer, a man who looks at a problem and asks, what's the smartest way to solve this? And sitting in that coffee shop, my cold coffee untouched, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them now. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a war they'd been preparing for. I was going to disappear, not physically, but financially, legally, strategically. I was going to become invisible while standing right in front of them, and when the day finally came, when they thought they'd won, I would show them exactly who they'd underestimated. That night, I went home. Grace was watching television, relaxed, smiling. She asked how my day was. I said it was fine. She kissed me on the cheek. I didn't flinch. I just smiled back and went to the garage where I kept my old laptop and the files they never bothered to look at. And I started building. The next morning, I opened a new bank account. Not at our usual bank, somewhere across town, under my mother's maiden name as the account administrator, with me as the sole signer. It was small at first, just $100 transferred from a freelance check Grace didn't know about. But it was a start. And over the next 7 years, while Grace planned my disposal and Jade coached her through it, while Savannah slowly stopped calling me Dad and started using my first name, while they all assumed I was fading into irrelevance. I built an empire they never saw coming. I sold my vintage comic book collection, worth $18,000, to a collector in Boston. Grace never noticed they were gone. She'd called them junk years ago. I took on weekend consulting jobs, telling Grace I was helping a friend or running errands. Every dollar went into investments, dividend stocks, index funds, municipal bonds. I inherited $35,000 from my uncle when he passed. Grace knew about it. What she didn't know was that I put it into a separate trust before it ever touched our joint account. I bought a small rental property 3 towns over, a cottage near the coast, paid in cash through an LLC I'd quietly formed. It generated $3,200 a month in rental income. And the house we lived in, the one Grace thought she'd get half of in the divorce? 2 years ago, I transferred it into an irrevocable trust with very specific conditions. Conditions that meant if we divorced, the house reverted entirely to me. Grace never checked the deed. Why would she? She thought I was just a tired old man shuffling toward obsolescence. By the time my 68th birthday rolled around, I had over $470,000 in assets they knew nothing about. I had a rental property generating passive income. I had investments that would sustain me for the rest of my life, and I had documentation of every lie, every secret meeting, every time Levi's car was parked in our driveway while I was at the hardware store. I didn't do this out of anger, not at first. I did it because I'm a builder. And when someone tries to tear down what you've built, you build something they can't touch, something they can't take, something that's yours. So when Jade handed me those divorce papers on my birthday morning, when she smiled that smug, victorious smile and called me a wait, I didn't break, I didn't cry, I didn't beg, because I knew something they didn't. The war was already over. They just didn't know they'd lost. Subscribe and hit that notification bell if you want to see what happened next, because in the next chapter I'm going to tell you exactly how I revealed the truth, and how their faces looked when they realized what I'd done. Drop a comment and let me know. Would you have done the same? Or would you have walked away? After they left that morning, after Jade's smug smile, after Grace's averted eyes, after Savannah's cold indifference, I went back inside and sat down in my chair. The house was quiet. For the first time in 42 years of marriage, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom. I opened the envelope and read through the divorce papers carefully. I'm an engineer by trade, so I've always had an eye for details, for fine print, for the things people hope you won't notice. Grace's lawyer had done a thorough job, or so they thought. The documents outlined a clean 50-50 split of marital assets. The house, my pension, our joint savings account, everything accumulated during the marriage. Standard procedure in our state. Fair, even. Except none of it applied to me anymore, because the house wasn't a marital asset. Not legally. Not for 2 years now. The pension had been restructured with beneficiary terms that protected it in case of divorce. And that joint savings account they were counting on? It held $11,000. Enough to look legitimate, but a fraction of what I'd quietly moved into protected accounts. I set the papers down and made myself another cup of tea. Then I did something I hadn't done in 7 years. I called my lawyer. Blake answered on the second ring. "Harry, happy birthday, old friend. How's retirement treating you?" "It's about to get interesting," I said. They made their move. There was a pause. Then Blake's voice shifted. All business. "Divorce papers. Hand-delivered by my mother-in-law this morning." Blake let out a low whistle. "That's cold, even for Jade. You holding up okay?" "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it. "I need you to file the counter-response. Everything we discussed. The trust documentation, the asset separation agreements, all of it. You sure you want to do this now? We could negotiate, drag it out, give them time to—" "No," I interrupted. "They've had 7 years to reconsider. I'm done waiting." Blake was quiet for a moment. "All right, I'll have everything filed by end of business today. Harry, they're not going to see this coming." "I know. It's going to hurt them. Badly." "I know that, too." After I hung up, I spent the rest of the day doing something I hadn't allowed myself in years. I packed. Not everything, just my personal things. Clothes, books, my tools from the garage, the photo albums from before Savannah stopped smiling at me. I boxed them methodically, labeling each one in neat handwriting. Grace came home that evening around 6. I heard her car in the driveway, heard her heels clicking on the walkway. She opened the door and stopped when she saw the boxes stacked in the hallway. "Harrison?" Her voice was uncertain. Not guilty, she wasn't capable of that anymore, but surprised. I stepped out of the kitchen, a dish towel in my hands. "I told you I'd be out by the end of the week. I'm a man of my word." She stared at me. You're not going to fight this?" "Why would I fight it, Grace? You clearly want to leave. I'm not going to beg you to stay." Something flickered across her face. For just a second, I saw the woman I'd married 42 years ago, the one who laughed at my terrible jokes, who danced with me in the kitchen, who promised forever. Then it was gone. "Where will you go?" she asked. "I have options." "Harrison, She stopped, struggled with words she couldn't quite find. "This doesn't have to be ugly." I folded the dish towel carefully and set it on the counter. "You're right, it doesn't." She looked relieved. Actually relieved. "I've already signed the papers," I continued. "My lawyer will file the response tomorrow. It should all be very clean." "Your lawyer?" Now she looked nervous. "Harrison, you don't need a lawyer. We can handle this ourselves. It's just paperwork." "I'm sure your lawyer would disagree." "That's different. Mom insisted I have representation, but you don't need to waste money on—" "It's already done, Grace." The air between us went cold. "What did you tell them?" she asked quietly. "The truth." "What truth?" I looked at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and for the first time in 7 years, I let her see past the mask I'd been wearing. "That I'm not the man you think I am." She opened her mouth to respond, but her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I saw the name on the screen, Levi. She quickly turned the phone face down. Too quickly. "I should go," she said. "I'm meeting Mom for dinner." "Of course you are." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then stopped. "Harrison, I never wanted to hurt you." I almost laughed. Almost. "Yes, you did, Grace. You just wanted it to be clean, painless, easy. You wanted me to disappear without making noise. But here's the thing about engineers." She turned back, her hand on the doorknob. "We build things to last, even when they're breaking." She left without another word. I stood in that kitchen, in the house I'd paid for, surrounded by boxes of a life I was voluntarily leaving behind, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The war wasn't coming. It was already here, and they still had no idea what they were walking into. Over the next 3 days, I moved my things into the cottage, the rental property they didn't know I owned. It was smaller than our house, but it was mine. Every square foot, every nail, every mortgage payment. Actually, there was no mortgage. I'd paid cash. I spent those days setting up my new life. I arranged my books on the shelves, hung pictures on the walls, set up my workbench in the small garage. The view from the porch overlooked the water. Every morning, I watched the sunrise with my tea. It was the most peace I'd had in 7 years. Grace called twice, both times to ask logistical questions about the house, about bills, about things she suddenly realized she didn't know how to handle. I answered politely, gave her the information she needed, didn't offer anything extra. On the 3rd day, Blake called. "Harry, you need to sit down for this." "I'm already sitting." "Grace's lawyer just received our filing. They're losing their minds." "Tell me." Blake laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "They just realized the house isn't in both names anymore. They're demanding documentation on when it was transferred, claiming you committed fraud, threatening to challenge the trust." "Can they?" "Not a chance. Everything was legal, documented, filed properly. But Harry, they're going to come at you hard now. Jade's already calling, demanding meetings, saying you deceived her daughter." "Let them come." "There's more," Blake said carefully. "Grace's lawyer is asking about other assets, bank accounts, investments, property. They think you're hiding things." "I'm not hiding anything. Everything I have is documented and legally separated from marital assets. I consulted with you every step of the way." "I know, but they're going to paint you as sneaky, manipulative." "Blake," I interrupted, "let me ask you something. If a man overhears his wife planning to divorce him the moment he's too old to fight back, and he spends 7 years protecting himself, is that sneaky? Or is that smart?" Blake was quiet for a long moment. "It's smart, Harry. It's damn smart." "Then I'm not worried." But that night, alone in my cottage with the sound of waves in the distance, I allowed myself to feel the weight of what was coming. They weren't going to accept this quietly. Jade would fight. She always did. Grace would cry. She'd play the victim. And Savannah. I didn't know what Savannah would do. That was the part that still hurt. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next? That's when everything explodes. Drop a comment, Team Harry or Team Grace. Let me know where you stand. They came on a Saturday morning. All 3 of them, Jade, Grace, and Savannah. I was on my porch, coffee in hand, watching fishing boats drift across the harbor when I saw Jade's Mercedes pull into my driveway. I'd been expecting this. I set down my coffee and stood, walking to meet them halfway across the lawn. Jade stepped out first, and if looks could kill, I'd have been dead before she reached me. Grace followed, her face blotchy from crying. Savannah came last, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "You lied to us," Jade said without preamble. Her voice was ice. "You hid assets. You manipulated legal documents. You committed fraud. Good morning to you too, Jade." "Don't you dare." I held up a hand. "I didn't commit fraud. Every financial move I made was legal, documented, and reviewed by my attorney. The house was transferred into a trust 2 years ago through proper legal channels. I have the paperwork. Would you like copies?" "You should have told Grace." "Why? She never asked. She never looked at the deed. She never questioned where money was going because she assumed I was just a tired old man who didn't matter anymore." Grace flinched. "Harrison, that's not fair." "Fair?" I turned to my wife. "Grace, you planned this divorce for 7 years. You waited until you thought I'd be too old, too weak to fight back. You discussed it with your mother while I was in the next room. You let your boyfriend pressure you to leave me, and you told him to be patient because you wanted to maximize what you'd take from me." Her face went white. "How did you?" "I heard you, 7 years ago. That Thursday when you were supposed to be at book club. You were on the phone with Jade, planning my disposal." Jade stepped forward. "You were spying on your own wife?" "I was standing in my own hallway, in my own house. That's not spying. That's existing. You had no right. I had every right." My voice rose for the first time, and they all took a step back. I had the right to protect myself when I discovered my wife and her mother were counting down the days until I was useless. I had the right to secure my own future when I realized my family saw me as dead weight. Savannah finally spoke. "Dad." "Don't." I looked at my daughter, and my voice went quiet again. "Don't call me Dad now, Savannah. You stopped calling me that 3 years ago. You started using my first name like I was some stranger you tolerated at family dinners." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's not... I didn't mean..." "Didn't you?" I asked gently. "Tell me the truth. When's the last time you called me just to talk? When's the last time you asked about my life, my work, anything that mattered to me?" She couldn't answer. I turned back to Jade and Grace. "Here's what's going to happen. The divorce will proceed. I've already signed the papers, but the settlement will be based on actual marital assets, which, as you've now discovered, are considerably less than you anticipated." "You can't do this," Jade said. "We'll fight you. We'll take you to court. You'll lose." I said it simply, factually. Everything I did was legal. My lawyer has documentation of every transaction, every transfer, every decision. You have no case." Grace was crying now, really crying. "Harrison, please, we can work this out. We don't have to." "Work what out, Grace?" I asked. "Our marriage? You ended that 7 years ago when you decided I was a problem to be managed instead of a partner to be respected. I'm just finally catching up to your decision." "But the house," she whispered. "Where will I go?" "That's not my problem anymore." "You're throwing me out?" "No, you threw yourself out when you handed me divorce papers on my birthday. I'm just clarifying the terms." Jade's face had gone red. "You vindictive, manipulative." "Careful," I said quietly. "I have recordings too." The silence that followed was absolute. "What recordings?" Jade asked slowly. "Phone calls. Conversations. Discussions about managing the old man and waiting him out. Plans to maximize your take from the divorce. Details about Levi and his impatience with Grace's timeline. Would you like me to play them?" Grace looked like she might be sick. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my files, and hit play. Jade's voice filled the morning air, tinny but clear. "Once he's got nothing left to offer, you can finally live the life you deserve." I stopped the recording. "I have 47 more of these," I said, "spanning 6 years, all legally recorded in my own home, which is permitted under state law. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to accept the divorce settlement as outlined. You're going to stop threatening me with legal action. And in exchange, these recordings stay private. You're blackmailing us? Savannah's voice was small, shocked. No, I said, looking at my daughter. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. Grace collapsed into one of my porch chairs, her face in her hands. Jade stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Savannah just stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. I'm not a monster, I said quietly. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because you left me no choice. You wanted to discard me like trash. I'm simply refusing to be discarded. We never, Grace started. Yes, you did. I cut her off. And the worst part? If you'd just been honest 7 years ago, if you come to me and said the marriage wasn't working, I would have let you go. I would have been heartbroken, but I would have respected your honesty. Instead, you lied. You planned. You waited for me to become weak enough that I couldn't defend myself. I looked at all three of them. So, here's my final offer. Take the settlement. Move on with your lives. And maybe, we can find a way to be civil. Because despite everything, Grace, we did have 42 years together. Some of them were good. And Savannah. My voice caught, just for a second. You're still my daughter. That hasn't changed, even if you don't call me Dad anymore. Savannah's tears spilled over. Jade grabbed Grace's arm. Come on, we're leaving. We'll see him in court. No, you won't, I said, because you'll lose, and you know it. Jade dragged Grace toward the car. Savannah lingered for a moment, her eyes meeting mine. Dad, she whispered, I'm sorry. I know, I said, but sorry doesn't change what happened. She nodded and followed her mother and grandmother to the car. I watched them drive away, their Mercedes kicking up dust on my gravel driveway. Then I sat back down in my chair, picked up my now cold coffee, and stared out at the water. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. But I also felt something else. For the first time in 7 years, I felt like myself again. Not their victim, not their burden, just Harrison, just me. Subscribe now if you want to see how this ends. Because there's one more twist coming. One final secret I haven't told anyone. Not even them. Hit that like button and drop a comment. Did Harrison go too far? Or did he do exactly what he had to do? 3 months passed after that confrontation on my porch. 3 months of lawyers, paperwork, and cold negotiations through intermediaries. Grace and I never spoke directly again. Everything went through Blake and her attorney. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in October. I signed the papers in Blake's office, surrounded by filing cabinets and the smell of old coffee. Grace signed hers somewhere across town. We didn't attend the same appointment. I think we both knew that if we sat in the same room again, something would break that couldn't be fixed. When it was done, Blake shook my hand. How do you feel? Free, I said. And I meant it. The settlement went exactly as I'd planned. Grace got half of our joint savings, all $5,500 of it, and a portion of my pension that amounted to less than she'd hoped for, but more than she deserved. The house stayed with the trust. My investments, my rental property, my carefully built empire remained untouched. She moved into an apartment downtown with Levi. I heard through mutual friends that it wasn't going well. Apparently, Levi wasn't quite as charming when he wasn't playing the role of the forbidden younger man. Reality has a way of exposing people. I didn't take satisfaction in that. Well, maybe a little. Jade stopped speaking to me entirely. No surprise there. I'd heard she was telling everyone who'd listened that I was a con artist, a manipulator, a cruel man who'd stolen from his own family. The irony wasn't lost on me, but Savannah was the part that still hurt. She didn't call after that day at the cottage. Not for weeks. I told myself it was for the best, that she needed time, that forcing a relationship would only push her further away. But every time my phone rang and it wasn't her, something in my chest tightened. I was sitting on my porch on a Saturday afternoon, reading a book I'd been meaning to get to for years, when I heard tires on gravel. I looked up. Savannah's car. My heart did something complicated. Hope and fear mixed together in a way I couldn't untangle. She got out slowly, like she wasn't sure she should be there. She was wearing jeans and an old sweater I'd bought her for Christmas years ago, the one with the lighthouse on it. She'd complained it was too dad-like when she opened it. She'd kept it anyway. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. Dad. Not Harrison. Not, "Hey." Dad. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, setting my book down. "You want to sit?" She nodded and climbed the porch steps, settling into the chair next to mine. We sat in silence for a long moment, both of us staring out at the water. "I've been thinking a lot," she finally said. "About everything. About how I treated you. About what Mom and Grandma did. About, God, Dad, about what kind of person I became. Savannah. No, let me say this." She turned to face me and her eyes were red. "I was awful to you. For years. I stopped calling you Dad because Mom said it made you seem old. I stopped visiting because Grandma said you were depressing to be around. I let them poison me against you, and I didn't even fight it." "You were caught in the middle," I said gently. "That's not your fault." "It is, though." Her voice cracked. "I'm 36 years old. I'm not a child. I made choices. I chose to believe their version of you instead of remembering who you actually were. The dad who taught me to ride a bike, who helped me with my math homework every night, who sat with me when I was heartbroken after my first breakup and told me I deserved someone who saw how special I was." I felt my own eyes stinging. "I forgot that person," she whispered, "and I'm so, so sorry." I reached over and took her hand. "I never forgot you, Savannah. Not for 1 second." She broke then, really broke, crying in a way I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. I moved my chair closer and put my arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into me like she used to when she was small. We sat like that for a long time. "Dad," she finally said, wiping her eyes, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why didn't you tell me? When you found out what Mom was planning, why didn't you come to me?" I was quiet for a moment, choosing my words carefully. "Because I didn't want to put you in the middle. You're her daughter. You're my daughter. I couldn't ask you to choose sides." "But I chose anyway," she said bitterly. "I chose wrong. You chose your mother. That's not wrong, Savannah. That's natural." "Even when she was planning to destroy you?" "Even then." I squeezed her hand. "Here's the thing about being a parent. You don't stop loving your child just because they hurt you. You don't stop wanting the best for them just because they choose someone else. Love isn't conditional. At least, it shouldn't be." She looked at me with something like wonder. "How are you not angry?" "Oh, I was angry," I admitted. "For a long time. But anger is exhausting, sweetheart. And at some point I realized that holding on to it was only hurting me. So I let it go." "I don't know if I can forgive Mom," she said quietly. "Or Grandma. They used me. They used you. They turned our family into a game. You don't have to forgive them today. Maybe not ever. That's your choice to make. What about you? Do you forgive them?" I thought about that. Really thought about it. "I'm working on it," I finally said. "Not for them. For me. Because carrying that weight around is too heavy." We sat in silence again, but this time it was comfortable. Peaceful. "Dad," Savannah said after a while, "can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I want to be part of your life again. Really part of it. Not just holidays and obligation. I want to know you. The real you. Not the version Mom and Grandma created." My throat tightened. "I'd like that very much." "Can we start over? Not forget everything, but build something new?" "Yes," I said simply. "Yes, we can." She smiled then, a real smile, the first I'd seen from her in years. "Good," Because I missed my dad. I missed you too, sweetheart. As the sun started to set over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Savannah leaned her head on my shoulder. Dad? She said softly. Yeah? This cottage is beautiful. How long have you had it? I smiled. That's actually something I need to talk to you about. She lifted her head, looking at me curiously. What do you mean? There's one more thing I never told anyone. Not your mother, not Jade, not even Blake. What is it? I took a breath. This property, this cottage, the land, everything. It's not just mine. What do you mean? 3 years ago, I started putting your name on the deed. Slowly, legally, through the trust. When I'm gone, it won't be part of any estate dispute. It won't be something your mother can claim. It'll be yours. Completely. Savannah stared at me. But why? After everything I did? Because you're my daughter, I said simply. And because I believe in who you can become, not just who you were. This cottage? It's my way of saying that even when I couldn't trust your choices, I never stopped hoping you'd find your way back. She started crying again, but this time they were different tears. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Maybe not, I agreed. But love isn't about deserving. It's about believing. And I've always believed in you, Savannah, even when you stopped believing in yourself. She hugged me then, tightly, desperately, and I held my daughter and thought about all the years we'd lost and all the years we might still have. Thank you, Dad, she said into my shoulder, for not giving up on me. Never, I promised. Not ever. If this story hit you in the heart, smash that subscribe button right now. Because the final chapter? That's where I tell you what happened next, and what I learned about revenge, forgiveness, and what it really means to win. Drop a comment. Would you have given Savannah a second chance? Let's talk about it. 1 year after my 68th birthday, I woke up in my cottage by the sea and made myself breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. Simple. Mine. The morning light was soft through the kitchen window, and I could hear gulls calling outside. I'd learned their patterns over the past year. Which ones were territorial, which ones were just loud, which ones showed up when the fishing boats came in. I'd learned a lot of things. Savannah came by every Sunday now. Sometimes we cooked together. Sometimes we just sat on the porch and talked. She told me about her life, her struggles, her hopes. I listened the way I should have been allowed to listen all along. She'd cut contact with Jade entirely. Said she needed space from the toxicity. I didn't push her either way. Grace and I hadn't spoken since the divorce was finalized. I heard she and Levi broke up after 6 months. Apparently the thrill wore off once there was no more sneaking around. Last I heard, she was living alone, working part-time at a bookstore, trying to figure out what came next. I didn't wish her harm, but I didn't wish her well either. I just wished her away from my life. The rental property was still generating income. My investments were growing steadily. I'd started consulting again, not for the money, but because I enjoyed the work. Turned out being retired and useless was more appealing than being actually retired. I had friends now, real ones, people I'd met through the community center, through my consulting work, through volunteering at the Maritime Museum, people who knew me as Harrison, not as somebody's husband or somebody's burden. I was building a life, a real one, on my terms. People ask me sometimes if I regret how things happened, if I wish I'd fought differently or forgiven faster or been less calculated in my response. The answer is no. I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret building an empire while they planned my downfall. I don't regret the recordings, the documentation, the strategic legal moves, because here's what I learned. Revenge isn't about destruction. Real revenge is refusing to let people who betrayed you define your worth. It's building a life so solid, so complete, so undeniably yours that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. They thought I was dead weight. I proved I was a foundation. They thought I had nothing. I built everything. They thought I'd beg. I walked away. And that quiet dignity, that refusal to be diminished, that was the real victory. Not the money, not the house, not even the vindication. The victory was waking up every morning in a place I loved, surrounded by people who valued me, doing work that mattered, and feeling free. Grace took 42 years from me, but she didn't take my future, and she definitely didn't take my peace. Last week, Savannah brought someone to Sunday dinner, a man named Tristan. Kind eyes, good handshake, made my daughter laugh. She was nervous introducing us. I could tell, but I shook his hand and invited him to sit, and we talked about boats and engineering and the weather, and by the end of the evening, Savannah was glowing. As they were leaving, she hugged me tight. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart." She pulled back and looked at me seriously. "You know what you taught me this year?" "What's that?" "That being strong doesn't mean being hard, that protecting yourself doesn't make you cruel, that you can survive betrayal without becoming bitter." "You taught yourself that," I said. "I just gave you space to figure it out." She smiled. "We're a good team." "Yes," I agreed. "We are." After she left, I sat on my porch as the sun set over the water. The sky turned gold, then pink, then deep purple. 69 years old. A divorce behind me. A betrayal survived. A daughter reclaimed. And ahead of me? Nothing but possibility. I thought about that birthday morning a year ago. The knock on the door. The divorce papers. Jade's smug smile. They thought they were ending my story. They were just giving me permission to start a new one. And this story? This one is mine. Thank you for staying with me through this whole journey. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that you're stronger than the people who underestimate you, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment telling me your story, because we're all building something. And sometimes we just need to be reminded that we're worth fighting for. This is Grandpa Harry, signing off. And remember, the best revenge is a life well lived.